I'm Wrecker Rick, and you're watching Murphy's Diesel, and we're in Wilcox, Arizona, folks.
Rick Murphy is widely recognized as one of the most prominent figures in heavy recovery in the United States. He is the owner of Murphy's Diesel, operating 3 locations across Arizona, and runs a YouTube channel with over 745,000 subscribers. His videos regularly reach hundreds of thousands to millions of views by documenting real recovery operations, ranging from massive trucks weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds stuck deep in mud to families stranded in severe snowstorms. He is also known for building specialized off-road recovery vehicles that can access terrain where standard trucks simply cannot go. However, Rick's reputation is not built on equipment or scale alone. Over the years, he has become a familiar name in the off-road and heavy recovery community because of the decisions he makes in high-risk situations. The following are 5 recovery operations that not only impressed viewers, but also played a key role in defining Rick's name. Top 5. Rescue of a veteran stuck in deep mud. Ford F-150 off-grid, Arizona forest. The incident took place in a remote forest area outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The call came in after a U.S. military veteran drove his Ford F-150 off established trails to collect firewood. The ground looked stable at first, but recent moisture had turned the soil into deep mud. The truck sank quickly, settling to the frame with no cell signal in most areas and no nearby help. The situation escalated into a real risk of being stranded overnight. Rick Murphy received the request and made a quick decision. Instead of bringing a large wrecker, he chose a custom-built Ram 5500 off-road recovery truck. The reasoning was simple. A bigger truck would not make it through the narrow forest paths without getting stuck as well. The Ram 5500 had better mobility, higher ground clearance, and was built specifically for this kind of terrain. When Rick reached the location, the situation was worse than expected. The Ford F-150 was buried deep, with mud covering most of the lower body. The tires had no traction. Rick first assessed the ground and identified a stable anchor point, a solid tree positioned at the right angle. He set up a winch line, adjusted the pulling angle, and began applying controlled tension. The process was slow. Each pull had to be measured to avoid snapping the line or shifting the truck deeper into the mud. The challenges were constant. The mud acted like suction, pulling the truck down each time movement stopped. The weather was unstable, and the ground conditions continued to worsen. Rick also had to ensure his own truck stayed on stable ground. One mistake could result in 2 vehicles stuck instead of 1. He repositioned multiple times, adjusted the winch setup, and maintained steady pressure rather than forcing a single aggressive pull. After several controlled attempts, the truck began to move, inch by inch. The F-150 broke free from the mud and was pulled onto firmer ground. The recovery was completed without damage to either vehicle. The veteran's reaction was immediate and emotional. He thanked Rick repeatedly, not just for the recovery, but for showing up at all. Rick later titled the video, "This American Hero Stuck in the Mud." Highlighting the man's service rather than the difficulty of the job, the video gained significant traction online, drawing attention to both the situation and Rick's approach. This recovery represents more than a technical success. It reflects a consistent pattern in Rick's work, helping individuals who would otherwise have no options. In this case, it was not just about pulling a truck out of mud. It was about recognizing someone who had served the country and making sure they were not left alone in a difficult situation. Top 4. Rescue of a man. Missing for 72 hours in the Arizona desert. Off-road canyon recovery. The case began with a missing person report in a remote desert canyon in Arizona. A driver had been unaccounted for nearly 72 hours. His vehicle was later located deep inside a narrow canyon, far beyond normal road access. The terrain was steep, uneven, and isolated. Standard recovery vehicles could not reach the site. Time was critical. The longer the delay, the higher the risk to the driver's life. Rick Murphy received the call and mobilized immediately. This was not a solo operation. Members of his family joined the mission, forming a small but coordinated team. He selected his Ram 5500 off-road recovery truck, equipped with 58-inch tires, reinforced suspension, and specialized gear designed for extreme terrain. Every tool loaded had a purpose: winch systems, recovery straps, spare fuel, and emergency supplies. The approach into the canyon required precise driving. The path narrowed quickly, with sharp drops on both sides. Rick moved slowly, adjusting tire placement with each section. At several points, the truck had to crawl over uneven rock formations where one wrong move could shift the center of gravity. The team stopped multiple times to assess the route ahead before proceeding. Once inside the canyon, they began the search. Visibility was limited due to the terrain layout. After locating the vehicle, they confirmed the driver was alive. The next step was extraction. The vehicle was positioned in a way that made direct pulling difficult. Rick set up a winch system. Using available anchor points within the canyon walls, he adjusted the angle to avoid pulling the vehicle into a worse position. The recovery process took time. Each movement required coordination. The canyon space limited repositioning, so every pull had to count. At one point, the angle of the truck and terrain created a high rollover risk. Rick later described the moment with a simple statement: "We almost died." It was not an exaggeration. The combination of tight space, unstable ground, and heavy equipment created constant danger. Despite the conditions, the team maintained control. They continued step by step, stabilizing the vehicle and guiding it out of the canyon. The driver was successfully recovered after nearly 3 days stranded in the desert. The operation was later documented in the video titled "Man Missing in the Arizona Desert for 72 Hours. We Almost Died." It quickly gained traction online due to the raw nature of the footage and the clear level of risk involved. This recovery highlights a key aspect of Murphy's Diesel. It is not just about capability, it is about willingness to operate at the edge of safety when a life is at stake. In this case, the line between recovery work and personal risk was minimal. Rick and his team crossed that line with full awareness of the consequences. Top 3. Flying 1,500 miles to save a farming family, cat skid steer and mulcher trapped under ice. The situation began in Waneta, Nebraska. A farming family had recently invested in new equipment, including a cat skid steer and a mulcher, after a severe winter freeze. Both machines became trapped under 6 to 8 inches of solid ice. The ground beneath had softened, creating a combination of frozen surface and unstable mud below. The equipment could not move. Without it, the family risked losing an entire working season. They reached out for help, but local options were limited. The conditions were unusual, and most operators were unwilling to take on the risk. The request eventually reached Rick Murphy. After assessing the situation, he made a decision that stood out immediately. Instead of declining or postponing, he chose to go. Rick and his family arranged travel from Arizona to Denver by air. From there, they rented a vehicle and drove approximately 3 hours to reach Waneta. The total distance covered was close to 1,500 miles. This was not a contracted job with guaranteed return. It was a direct response to a family with no remaining options, once on site. Rick evaluated both machines. The skid steer and mulcher were locked in place by thick ice around the tracks and undercarriage. The first step was preparation. He gathered available tools and set up recovery gear suited for cold conditions. Before any pulling could begin, the ice had to be broken. The team started by manually breaking sections of ice around the equipment. This required time and effort. Each layer removed exposed wet, unstable ground underneath. As temperatures shifted slightly during the day, the surface turned into a mix of slush and mud. a condition often described as a thawing mess. This made traction inconsistent and increased the risk of the machines sinking further once movement started. Rick set up a controlled pulling system using his recovery equipment. He adjusted the angle carefully to avoid damaging the machinery. The process was done in stages. First, he focused on freeing the skid steer. Once it showed slight movement, he continued with steady tension instead of aggressive force. After multiple controlled pulls, the machine broke free. The mulcher presented a similar challenge, but required repositioning and a new setup. Rick adapted quickly. Using the same step-by-step method, break the ice, stabilize the ground as much as possible, then apply controlled pulling force. Over time, both pieces of equipment were successfully recovered without damage. The operation involved several challenges beyond the technical work. The distance alone created logistical pressure, travel costs, time commitment, and equipment limitations had to be managed without certainty of outcome. The farm environment added another layer of difficulty, with frozen ground in some areas and soft mud in others. Timing was critical. Delays could have worsened conditions or caused further sinking. In the end, both machines were fully recovered and operational. The family regained the ability to continue their work for the season. The entire process was documented in the video titled, "We Flew 1,500 Miles to Save a Family Who Had No Other Option," which quickly gained attention and was projected to reach millions of views. This recovery demonstrates a different dimension of Rick's work. It was not about extreme terrain or massive weight. It was about distance, commitment, and impact. By choosing to travel across states, Rick did more than recover equipment. He helped secure a family's livelihood and reinforced a consistent principle behind Murphy's Diesel. Help is not limited by location when the need is real. Top 2. Recovering a 240,000-pound truck from deep mud using only a Ram 5500, Arizona. The incident took place during a major storm in Arizona. A heavy truck, weighing approximately 240,000 pounds, about 109 tons, became stuck in a mix of mud and snow. The ground had softened after precipitation, and the vehicle sank deep under its own weight. By the time help was requested, the truck was no longer mobile. The wheels had lost all traction, and the frame was close to being grounded. When Rick Murphy arrived, the scale of the situation was clear. This was not a standard recovery. Under normal conditions, a job like this would require multiple heavy wreckers or specialized equipment. However, Rick made a decision that surprised even experienced operators. Instead of deploying a large recovery unit like his Hellboy or bringing in additional trucks, he chose to use a single Ram 5500 off-road recovery vehicle. The decision was based on access and control. The terrain was unstable, and heavier equipment risked getting stuck as well. The Ram 5500, while smaller, offered better mobility and positioning. Rick understood that success would depend less on raw power and more on precision. He began by assessing the weight distribution and how deeply the truck was embedded. The mud created a suction effect, increasing resistance far beyond the vehicle's actual weight. Rick selected a stable position for his truck and established a proper pulling angle. A direct pull was not possible without increasing risk, so he adjusted the line to create a controlled path of movement. The recovery required multiple winching stages. Rick applied tension gradually, avoiding sudden force that could snap the line after each attempt. He paused to reassess. The team monitored the alignment, ensuring the truck moved in the intended direction. Small shifts in angle made a significant difference. The challenges were constant. The weight alone created extreme stress on the winch system. The mud continued to pull the truck downward whenever movement stopped. There was also a real risk of equipment failure. A snapped winch line under that level of tension could cause serious damage or injury. In addition, if the Ram 5500 lost traction or stability, the entire operation could fail immediately. Rick maintained a steady approach. He repositioned when necessary, adjusted the setup, and continued applying controlled force. Over time, the truck began to respond. The first movement was minimal, but it confirmed that the setup was working. From there, progress came slowly but consistently. After multiple cycles of tension and adjustment, the truck was finally pulled free from the mud and brought onto stable ground. The recovery was completed using only the Ram 5500, without additional heavy equipment. The operation was documented in the video titled, "I Rescued 240,000 Pounds from the Mud," using nothing but a Ram 5500, which reached over 781,000 views. The video gained attention not just for the scale of the recovery, but for the method used. This case highlights a core principle behind Rick's work. Success in recovery is not determined only by size or power. It depends on understanding conditions, making the right decisions, and executing with precision in this situation. Rick demonstrated that even an extreme load can be managed with the right approach. Top 1. Mass Rescue. During the historic Interstate 40 snowstorm, Ash Fork and Williams, 40 hours, nearly 30 vehicles. In March 2025, a major winter storm hit northern Arizona with over 60 centimeters of snow and sustained high winds. Interstate 40 was shut down completely. Traffic was redirected, but many drivers were already trapped along secondary routes between Ash Fork and Williams. Conditions worsened quickly. Vehicles lost traction, ran out of fuel, and became immobilized. Some drivers had been stuck for hours with no immediate assistance. Rick Murphy received multiple calls as the situation escalated. The area was outside his primary contract zones, meaning there was no formal obligation to respond. Despite that, he made a direct decision to go. He prepared his equipment and headed toward the affected routes, knowing the conditions were still deteriorating. When Rick arrived, the scale was larger than a single recovery. Groups of 15 to 20 vehicles were stranded in clusters along the road. Many contained families, including young children. Some vehicles had no remaining fuel. Temperatures were low enough to create immediate risk for anyone stranded without heat. The situation required continuous action rather than a one-time solution. Rick began working through the line of vehicles methodically. He would recover one car, move it to a safe position, then proceed to the next. Each recovery created space for others to move, but new vehicles continued to get stuck further down the road. The process repeated continuously. There was no clear endpoint. The operation extended to approximately 40 hours. During that time, Rick worked with minimal rest. Physical fatigue became a factor. Reaction times slowed, and each decision required more focus to maintain safety. Despite that, he continued the sequence: assess, position, pull, clear, and move forward. The technical challenges were significant. Snow depth reduced visibility and traction. Underneath, ice created unstable surfaces. Winch operations carried constant risk. A line failure under tension could cause serious damage. Rick had to maintain proper angles and controlled force in every pull. Equipment performance was also affected by the cold, increasing the need for careful handling. In addition to physical risk, there was financial cost. Fuel consumption, equipment wear, and time were all absorbed personally. There was no guarantee of compensation. Rick continued regardless, prioritizing the immediate needs of the people stranded. As vehicles were freed, drivers approached Rick to offer payment. In multiple instances, he declined. Instead, he told them to pass the help forward to someone else in need. The focus remained on clearing the road and getting people to safety. By the end of the operation, nearly 30 vehicles had been recovered. Dozens of individuals, including families with children, were able to leave the area safely. The continuous nature of the work and the number of recoveries made this one of the largest single events in Rick's career. The story was later covered by Fox 10 Phoenix, bringing broader attention to the scale of the effort. Online, viewers described the operation as astronomical due to the duration, conditions, and number of people involved. This event defines a central aspect of Rick's identity. It was not a single difficult pull or a technical challenge. It was sustained action under pressure, with no clear stopping point, over 40 hours. Rick continued to show up for each vehicle, one after another. The significance goes beyond recovery work. It represents a consistent choice to act when there is no requirement to do so. In this case, Rick did not just assist individual drivers, he helped stabilize an entire situation affecting multiple families at once. This operation stands as the clearest example of what separates Murphy's Diesel from others in the field. It is not defined only by equipment or capability, but by decisions made in real time, especially when conditions are at their worst. Conclusion: across these 5 recoveries, a clear pattern emerges. The scale increases step by step. It starts with one individual, a veteran stuck in mud with no way out. It expands to a missing driver in a canyon where time becomes critical. It moves to a farming family whose entire livelihood depends on a single operation. Then it reaches an extreme technical challenge involving a 240,000-pound truck. Finally, it culminates in a large-scale emergency, where nearly 30 vehicles and multiple families are stranded during a snowstorm. At each level, Rick Murphy responds in the same way. He assesses the situation, makes a decision, and takes action. The tools change, the risks increase, but the approach remains consistent. What defines Rick's success is not the size of his equipment or the number of views on his videos. It is the willingness to act when there is no guarantee of reward. Many of these recoveries involve personal cost, time, fuel, physical strain, and risk in several cases. He refuses payment entirely. The result is not just a completed job, but a direct impact on people who would otherwise have no solution. The phrase, "everyone deserves to be helped," is not presented as a slogan. It is reflected in repeated actions across different situations, whether it is a single driver or an entire line of stranded vehicles. The response does not change. This leads to a more difficult question. Who supports the person doing the recovery? Continuous exposure to risk, long hours, and responsibility for others create pressure that is not always visible. Behind each successful operation is a series of decisions made under stress, often without rest. The broader takeaway is simple. Not everyone operates a recovery truck, but the principle still applies. Helping others does not always require scale. It requires willingness. Following the work of Murphy's Diesel offers more than technical insight. It provides a clear example of consistent action in difficult situations, and it highlights something often overlooked: the real value of individuals who step in when others cannot.